What's up guys, we're back here with another NC1 versus the world comparison. I've owned my 2017 Acura NSX for about a month and a half now. I'm on a mission to compare it against other comparable cars, either comparable in terms of price or just overall ethos. And this McLaren Artura is about as comparable as it gets in terms of that ethos piece. We'll talk about price in just a second. The owner Joel actually picked this car up as a lease a couple years ago, and he's put over 16,000 miles on it. He's driven it everywhere, and he mentioned he's really enjoyed it as an all-around everyday usable hybrid supercar. Guess what? That's exactly the way that I enjoy my 2017 NSX. Both of these cars are powered by twin turbocharged V6 engines. They're mid-mounted right behind the driver. These cars have very similar dimensions, and they're both hybrid. But they go about hybrid assistance in sort of different ways. The overall goal for both hybrid systems is to enhance the driving dynamics and the performance. But being 5 to 6 years separated in terms of technology, there's quite a difference in how they go about implementation. So my NSX has 3 electric motors, one powering each of the 2 front wheels and one sandwiched between the engine and transmission for torque fill. That means the car is all-wheel drive. This Artura is rear-wheel drive only. There's only one electric motor that gives assistance to this V6 on the rear axle only. So let's go into some of the specs of this Artura. It has a 120-degree, which is a world first for a production engine, dry sump 3-liter twin turbocharged V6, and on its own, it already makes a very impressive 577 horsepower and 431 pound-feet of torque. But if you combine that with that electric motor, which on its own makes a peak of 94 horsepower and 166 pound-feet of torque, total peak output from this hybrid setup, 671 horsepower and 531 pound-feet of torque. You might be wondering, well, if you add the 431 torque and 166 torque from the engine and electric motor, that should give you close to 600 pound-feet, but McLaren purposely holds back the total system output in order to give this a more linear power delivery. We have an 8-speed dual clutch transmission here. There's no reverse gear with this transmission because it uses the electric motor for reverse. That helps save a bit of weight. This car also uses McLaren's first implementation of an electronic limited slip differential on that rear axle. All of its prior cars had an open differential, yes, including the P1, but they used brake vectoring in order to give the car a feeling of having an LSD. My NC1 has an actual ELSD on the rear axle. My NSX uses a 1.3 kilowatt hour battery. It's a non-plug-in system. It's charged primarily by the engine, but also by regen braking and coasting. Whereas the Artura has a 7 kilowatt hour battery, so something like 5.5 times the capacity. And that means this car actually has an EV-only range of 11 to 19 miles, depending on whether you use the US or Euro version of the EV range test. It is a plug-in hybrid, but Joel mentioned that he rarely has to actually charge it. The engine does a pretty good job at keeping it topped up. Weight of this car should be a little over 3,400 pounds. And that's largely due to this clever MCLA or McLaren Carbon Lightweight Architecture. Essentially, it's a carbon fiber monocoque, which have been used in McLarens in the past, but this one is an updated generation that has an integrated compartment for the hybrid battery. We've got double wishbone front suspension, multi-link rear, as you'd expect for a high-end supercar. Adaptive dampers are standard. But unlike the Super Series McLarens like the 720, 750, and so forth, this one uses traditional coil springs and dampers and anti-roll bars rather than the fancy inboard suspension of the 700 series. For brakes, we have carbon ceramics, 6-piston in the front, 4-piston in the rear, same as my NC1. The MSRP for this 2023 started at $237,000, but you throw some options on it, and you're right around $290,000. Current market value, I've seen these posted for as little as $180 to $190 used, but Joel mentioned a lot of those examples are actually dealer buybacks. For a clean example, you're looking at probably around $200,000, $60,000 to $80,000 more than a clean NC1 NSX of the 2017 to 2018 model year. If you move up to the updated 2019, you're talking about more like a maybe $50,000 to $60,000 price difference. So for all that extra money, are you actually getting the far superior hybrid V6 powered supercar? That is the question. First impressions of the interior, it's very, very blue, and I absolutely love it. McLaren interiors just have so much pop and style to it. It's simplistic, but also tech forward at the same time, and I love it. It kind of reminds me of like a Google Pixel product, if that makes sense. Very colorful, yet very intuitive to use. Nice quality leather. I love this steering wheel, fairly small diameter with a thin rim. It's not as ergonomic as my NC1 steering wheel, but it feels more purposeful. We have a Bowers & Wilkins sound system, this tablet style infotainment, which I do think dates the interior slightly just because of just how huge these bezels are. An electrically adjustable steering column where the screen moves with the wheel, that's excellent. In terms of overall comfort, I think the NC1 still takes the cake, largely because it doesn't have a carbon fiber monocoque. So with its more traditional aluminum space frame chassis, you don't have this intrusion into the footwell here on the driver's side, where my foot, it does have a dead pedal, but my feet are definitely slightly offset to the right. I love how this car looks from outside. It's got so much road presence, but because there are so many McLarens in the lineup and they all look very similar, they have very similar design language, I would say it's a lot more common to see a McLaren even here in the Bay Area compared to an NC1. So overall road presence, I actually would give it to the NC1. But enough of that, let's get this fired up and see how it drives, where it really counts. So it starts up in full EV mode, which is really cool. And we can use these toggles to change between your handling settings and your powertrain and I think transmission settings up here. So sport mode, track mode for the powertrain and transmission, manual mode for the trans, and then for the suspension, we have comfort, sport, and track. We're gonna use sport. This also has front axle lift, which is very nice. I do wish my NC1 had that. It was not even an option with my car, unfortunately. We're on Yokohama 8009 tires, so a sticky 200 treadwear compound. That's the only modification. Oh, okay, that is a lot of straight line performance right off the bat in second gear. We're actually gonna hit the ESC button once to turn dynamic handling mode on. Oh yeah, so much steering feel. Hydraulic steering rack. Can't beat it. Oh, wow. This has significantly more thrust than my car. My car does give you that off the line four-wheel drive acceleration, but once you're up to speed, it just pulls significantly harder. I love this steering rack. It's light, but it also loads up well in the corners. You have a real good sense of what the front end is doing here. Better than the NC1 steering by far. Whoa, just the sheer thrust of this car, but also the level of communication. The chassis rigidity here is so good. I can feel the benefits of that MCLA carbon monocoque here. And what I mean by that is that you feel the springs and dampers doing all the work when you're cornering, driving over bumps. There's very little chassis flex. Let's try a little straight line pull here from first gear. Oh, traction limited, even with sticky 8009 tires. You won't get that in the NC1. The NC1 is truly drama-free from a dig. This car is significantly livelier. It's more of a challenge to drive. So if that's what you're looking for from your hybrid supercar, this offers more thrills, definitely. Very quick shifting 8-speed dual clutch. I do think this is a step above the NC1's 9-speed. Now engine sound, interestingly, I far prefer my NC1's V6. This doesn't sound bad, but it doesn't have that induction growl, that almost VTEC-like bark that the NC1 provides. This is a bit more muted, even in track mode, but I cannot argue with this level of performance. Since this is a 120-degree V6, the turbos, the twin turbos, are mounted in the V. It's a hot V setup, and so there's very little turbo lag, And when you combine that with this electric motor, it's pretty intense. 8,500 RPM redline, that's 1,000 higher than my NC1s. And this thing pulls to the top. Oh yeah, this is the superior driver's car. There's no two ways about it. I am not going to sugarcoat it. It provides more feedback, it feels lighter, it feels nimbler, it accelerates significantly harder, and it just gives you that level of control, while at the same time, it'll let you feel like you're on the edge. So you do have to be cautious, and you need to be experienced in order to fully extract the performance from this car. The NC1, I wouldn't call it a cakewalk in terms of driving it hard. It does move around actually quite a bit, but because of its super handling all-wheel drive system and torque vectoring, it can help mask inadequacies with your driving technique. The brake pedal as well, so good in this car. Lots of feedback, easy to modulate. This car definitely feels light on its feet and agile. Oh my goodness. Properly fast car. It doesn't give you that insane acceleration of the 750S that I've driven on this same road. I mean, it's down, close to 80 horsepower, but it gives you a very similar overall feel. Intense acceleration with very little lag down low because of the hot V setup combined with the electric motor. But I'm surprised to say that even though this doesn't have the fancy inboard suspension, that MCLA really gives you a similar feel in terms of the suspension's doing all the work over the bumps. Oh my goodness. That is intense. Not 750S intense, but certainly more intense than the NC1. And now we can just dial it back into comfort mode. The suspension gets super supple. In fact, we'll put it into electric. Just drive around in silence. Look at that, we have 17 miles of range. As I found out, the last time I compared my NC1 against an excellent car in the form of a 2015 GT3, I drove the NC1 second, and I ended up still really enjoying it. Will that still hold true now that I'm driving one of the best supercars I think you can currently buy? Let's find out. All right, back in a familiar place, my 2017 Acura NC1 NSX. First thing I noticed just getting back into my car from the Artura was, wow, I don't have butterfly doors. It just makes it feel that ever so slightly just less special. In terms of interior impressions, oh, I hear an Artura zooming past. This feels a lot more traditional. It's not in your face with the blue and the futuristic overall visual design. This is a lot more typical Acura. I wouldn't say even the leather and the stitching feels any worse than the Artura's. It just visually doesn't look as special. And there are some touch points here that are not that great. These buttons, for example, feel like they're straight out of an MDX. The paddle shifters, they don't give you that nice satisfying click of the Artura's. Non-height adjustable seat in the NSX, which I find baffling because this car really doesn't accommodate taller drivers too well. There's a lot of headroom, but this becomes an issue when you're 6'2", 6'3". But in terms of build quality, I actually think the NC1 might be slightly better. The Artura, I did notice a few squeaks and rattles when I was driving it, and that has half the mileage. In terms of specs though, we are also powered by a twin turbocharged V6 here, but this has a 75-degree angle between the banks, and it's a 3.5 liter, so half a liter larger, but it only makes 500 horsepower and 406 pound-feet of torque. So it's not as high strung. The red line is 1,000 RPM lower, but we also have a more complex hybrid setup with 3 electric motors, as I mentioned. Total system output here, 573 horsepower, which interestingly is only 2 horsepower more than the output of just the Artura's V6 alone. And peak torque is 476 pound-feet, so quite a bit less than the Artura overall. This car also is way heavier, 3,900 pounds, so some 500 pounds heavier. 9-speed dual clutch transmission. The reverse gear is an actual gear on the transmission. It doesn't just use the EV mode. This is also double wishbone front, multi-link rear suspension with magneto-rheological dampers, but it's only soft or hard. There's no middle setting here. Drive-by-wire throttle and brake pedal and electric power steering. We have Brembo 6-piston front brakes, 4 pistons in the rear. This does have the optional carbon ceramic brakes, and we've got 19 and 20-inch staggered wheels. We're just on a Michelin Pilot Supersport tire, so much less sticky than that Artura's, but the widths are actually slightly larger, 10 millimeters front and rear. So we're a 245 front, 305 in the back. The Artura runs a 235 front, 295 in the back. Let's see how my NSX compares against one of the best driving supercars I have ever experienced. We're gonna put it straight into track mode. And the reason I'm using track here versus a combination of sport and track settings in the Artura is because, unfortunately, Acura does not let you separate out the different components of the mode. So powertrain and super handling all-wheel drive and VSA are all maxed out in track, which is what I want, but so are suspension and steering. In fact, I would rather have this in the softer suspension and lighter steering settings. So that's definitely one mark against the NC1 here. Will there be any benefit to the all-wheel drive system compared to that rear-wheel drive Artura? Yes, there is a benefit. The way this car puts the power down, much more drama-free, as I mentioned. Also, much better engine sound. This V6 sounds miles better than the Artura's. Transmission actually feels almost as quick. Not quite, but not far off. Alright, here's where the Artura shines. The much lighter curb weight means braking distances feel much shorter, and in the corners, there's no hiding that 500-pound curb weight difference. Corners, you get much less feedback from the steering, being EPS versus hydraulic, but also the front end isn't as sharp. It doesn't turn in with the same immediacy as that Artura, so that corner exit traction advantage is definitely there. It's very apparent, in fact, but you do give up a lot. There is a compromise here. All that extra weight means this is not the cornering machine that the Artura is. Let's do a roll from first gear. Oh, it won't let me go into first gear. All right, second it is. This does feel quite turbocharged. I think the assistance from the electric motors feels a little bit stronger than the Artura. The suspension here is a high point of the car, actually. Very good damping from these MR dampers. The difference is that you feel a little bit more chassis flex here. You don't get that super lightweight, rigid carbon monocoque. This car still pulls so hard, but the top end doesn't match the Artura's. 1,000 RPM more to work with that Artura 3-liter V6, and just a lot more power, 100 horsepower more while weighing less. It's the quicker car for sure. This is still really impressive. This car is easier to drive quickly because of the all-wheel drive, even though it's less communicative, it's less nimble. I just feel more secure in this car, and there is value to that. Even though it's brake by wire, it feels pretty good here. It feels natural, fairly easy to modulate, but that Artura brake pedal is just on another level. So much modulation, very linear, progressive bite. This one sometimes can feel a little bit dead towards the top of the pedal in comparison. Both are so enjoyable, but there are some clear advantages with the Artura. most of it comes down to the weight and the benefits of that carbon fiber monocoque. Transmission though, this feels 90% as good. Engine sound, this is twice as good, if I'm being honest. Honda really tuned this engine to sound excellent for a V6. Oh yeah. This still feels quite adjustable on throttle, but you get that safety net from the all-wheel drive. Whereas in the Artura, you really just have to rely on the VSA to keep you from flying off the cliff. Now, I just wish I could have this in the sport or softer suspension setting. This is just a little too busy for this road. Acura didn't give us that option. The suspension is completely tied to the dynamic mode that you're in, and that is a bummer. When we have this car in Sport Plus or Track, it really uses that V6 to keep the hybrid battery topped off. We're actually full right now. It'll never go into full EV mode in Sport Plus or Track. That means it always has that torque vectoring and torque fill available on demand when you're driving quickly. Straight line pull, drama free here. This is still a very fast car, don't get me wrong, but that Artura, the way it pulls to the top end, all the way from the bottom, compared to something like a 750S or the 675 LT that I drove a while back, the Artura just has this wave of torque from low RPM, low speed that helps negate the heavily turbocharged nature of that V6. In those V8 McLarens I just mentioned, you get so much turbo lag that you have to keep the revs high. But anyways, back to this head-to-head comparison. This is going to be a bit nuanced, but let me try to sum it up for you guys. When it comes down to it, if driving thrills, driving dynamics are your focus, your priority, the Artura is the superior car. It's the superior supercar. It feels more special, it's faster, it's also more adjustable in terms of the playfulness of that chassis. It feels more sophisticated with its suspension, its steering, its transmission, and of course that monocoque chassis. Everything about it just feels like it's on a slightly different level than the NC1. Here's the big but. The owner Joel mentioned in the 2 years he's had that car, he's had multiple issues, not only with the electric motor, but also the transmission. And the car's been sitting in the shop for 2 months. He only recently got it back. That's just something you don't hear about with the NC1. This is truly a Honda Acura product, even though the maintenance is going to be significantly higher than something like an MDX or a Honda Accord. Overall, you can still expect Honda levels of build quality and reliability. And that is exactly why I chose to get this car over some of the competitors in a similar price range. But if that's not your main focus, not your priority, and you want a true thrill-inducing supercar experience, there's nothing quite like McLaren. They are, I think, head and shoulders above anything else I've driven, including from Ferrari, this NSX, even from Porsche. McLaren is on another level. Their chassis tuning is just absolutely phenomenal. I have basically no complaints with it. You know, at $200,000, it better be a phenomenal car, because that's a lot of money to spend on a used McLaren. If you want to pick up a brand new one, you're looking at, with reasonable options, $270,000 to $290,000. Are you willing to put up with the potentially poor build quality and overall reliability? Only you can answer that. So big shout out to Joel. Let me know what you think about this comparison between the twin turbocharged hybrid V6 supercars. Which one do you think is better for the money? There's a big price difference between these two. If you've driven both, do you agree with me that the Artura is far more exciting dynamically? And if you've been a long-term owner of an NC1, have you had any issues with it? Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.